Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tearing completely into the ultimate gothic true crime story. We are talking about the most prolific female serial killer in human history, Elizabeth Báthory. But hey, strap in, because this isn't just your standard spooky horror story. It is an absolute masterclass in historical propaganda, weaponized law, and, quite frankly, how history is entirely written by the victors. She bathed in the blood of virgins to preserve her youth. I mean, you've probably heard that before, right? It's the chilling lore that everybody thinks they know. If you've ever even casually heard the name Elizabeth Báthory, this terrifying blood-soaked vampire is the exact image burned into your brain. It's literally the nightmare that has fueled centuries of Gothic novels and horror movies. And then there's this number, 650. Just let that sink in for a second. That is the rumored body count of the young girls she allegedly tortured and murdered. When you hear a massive statistic like that, it instantly cements her legacy as a monster of just unimaginable proportions. But we really need to ask ourselves a very important question here. Okay, let's dive into this. What if literally everything I just told you, the blood, the youth-obsessed vampire stuff, that massive body count, what if all of it was a 400-year-old lie? We're going to transition away from those spooky campfire stories right now and look straight at modern forensic reality, historical sociology, and cold, hard facts. Let's start with the absolute biggest myth of all, the blood bathing. The reality? Entirely false. Made up. This specific detail was actually invented a full century after her death by a Jesuit scholar named Laszlo Tarauzi in 1729. If you go back and read the actual 1611 trial transcripts, zero mentions of bloodbaths. None. Plus, modern medical experts are quick to point out that blood coagulates incredibly fast and smells horrific. So yeah, hardly the luxurious anti-aging skincare routine of an elegant 17th century countess. So what about that staggering number, 650 victims? Well, it turns out that number came from a single servant who was, let's be real, likely under extreme torture. The official court registers actually recorded 80. Modern historians estimate the real number was probably between 30 and 50 deaths, mostly from harsh corporal punishment and disease. And why couldn't it be 650? Because era census data proves that 650 missing girls would have entirely depopulated the local area. There was literally no missing persons crisis. And the whole idea that she was a vampiric monster, the reality is she was a deeply religious Protestant woman. She was highly educated, fluent in 4 languages, managed massive estates, and actively funded local schools and churches. The whole vampire link was basically a literary fabrication, created way later to sell Gothic fiction. Section 1. Following the royal money. Let's track the timeline, because this is where it gets interesting. 1560, she's born into the supremely powerful Báthory dynasty. 1575, marries Ferenc Nadasdy, and she's actively managing these massive estates while he's off fighting the Ottomans. 1604, Ferenc dies. Elizabeth is now a widow, but much more importantly, she's an incredibly wealthy widow in full control of her lands. This extreme vulnerability leads directly to December 1610, when she's abruptly arrested by a bitter political rival, George Thurzo. Which brings us to the core motive of this whole thing. How does a king erase a massive debt he simply cannot repay? Because King Matthias II of Hungary owed the Nadasdy Báthory estate an absolute fortune. The crown was essentially completely bankrupt, and Elizabeth Báthory held all the receipts. The king's tactic was completely ruthless and, honestly, highly efficient. Frame the creditor, confiscate the lands, cancel the debt. By accusing Elizabeth of these sensational, supernatural crimes, the crown essentially manufactured the perfect legal pretext to seize her wealth and eliminate a powerful female rival in one swift motion. And that brings us to the 1610 sham investigation, led directly by her political rival. Over 300 witnesses were coerced through absolutely brutal torture. But Elizabeth herself? She was never formally convicted. She wasn't even allowed to testify. Executing a Báthory would have sparked a massive diplomatic war, so they just struck a quiet deal. The crown took her wealth, and she was literally bricked inside a castle room until she died in 1614. Section 2, 2024 to 2026, Science Dismantles the Legend. Now, what's really interesting about this is how incredible modern technology is actually rewriting this history today. In 2024, LiDAR scans revealed those legendary torture dungeons were really just standard cold storage pantries and workshops. By 2025, modern graphology on her letters showed a deeply stressed estate manager with 0 signs of psychosis. Today, there's a huge academic consensus, part of the Báthory apologia movement, that views her almost entirely as the victim of a state-sponsored property heist. Get a load of this quote. A lone female killing 600-plus victims is statistically impossible in a pre-industrial setting without a state-level apparatus. That is from a peer-reviewed historical sociology analysis by Dr. Kimberly Kraft. The behavioral profiling simply doesn't match the myth whatsoever. The entire narrative relied solely on the political necessity of erasing her financial power. Section 3. Identifying modern witch hunts. Look, Elizabeth Báthory's story absolutely demands that we use something called source bias analysis. Whenever you hear a totally sensational story, you have to stop and ask 3 questions. Who is funding this narrative? Who actually benefits financially or politically from this person's downfall? And what real primary evidence actually exists? Just like King Matthias funded that investigation to erase his debts, we have to look for the hidden motives in our own media today. And this framework brilliantly illustrates how to dismantle propaganda right now. Step 1, follow the money behind the news. Step 2, spot those exaggerated, cartoonish accusations, especially when they're suddenly leveled against powerful individuals to strip their status. And step 3, always demand primary evidence over sensational gossip. Now, let's be absolutely clear with the facts here. Elizabeth Báthory wasn't an innocent saint. Historical evidence really does suggest she engaged in brutal, sometimes fatal corporal punishment of her servants. She was a complex, flawed, and incredibly severe historical figure. But she was a human being facing extreme domestic pressures. She was not a cartoon villain, and she for sure was not a blood-drinking vampire. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. If the victors of history could take a powerful woman, steal her property, and completely rewrite her legacy into the world's most prolific blood-bathing serial killer, who else in our history books has been entirely rewritten? It really makes you want to look a lot closer at the legends we've all been taught to believe, doesn't it? Keep questioning everything, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.